Welcome back, everybody, to another Mock Draft Monday. Happy draft week. In just 3 days' time, the Detroit Lions will be on the clock, and we will know the newest members of the organization. But until then, we still have a lot of speculation and some fun to be had. And today, we will do potentially the final Detroit Lions 7-round mock draft. And with that being said, let's get right on into it because we have a lot of good players today in a different kind of drafting strategy. Starting off with pick number 28, where the Detroit Lions get a little bit of a steal and a player that not many are talking about in Ole Miss defensive tackle Walter Nolan. Now, Walter Nolan is a player who had an 88.9 Pro Football Focus grade, sitting at 6'3", 305 pounds. Last season for the Rebels, he totaled 6.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, was named a consensus All-American, and has great abilities with his versatility, production. He's got twitchy, powerful hands. He's just a very good, well-rounded player, and reminds me a little bit of Jalen Carter. Now, he's not as consistent, not as dominant, and not as far along as Jalen Carter was when he was coming out of Georgia, which is why Carter went at 10, and Walter Nolan in this scenario will be a late first-round selection. But I think all of the tools are there. I think all of the ability that Jalen Carter has lies within Walter Nolan. And if the Lions can polish that up, can clean some things up, can put him in the weight room, can get him a little bit more consistent, that is the type of player in the ceiling that he has. And if the Lions can get even 75% of what the Eagles got in Jalen Carter for Walter Nolan, that will be a pick well spent. They need help on the defensive line. Aleem McNeil likely won't return until October, maybe even early November. DJ Reader is old and on the final years of his contract. And while I really like the depth at defensive tackle for Detroit, Walter Nolan is the best player available in this scenario, and addressing the defensive line, addressing defensive tackle is a need that very much needs to be addressed by the Detroit Lions. And going into the second round, the Detroit Lions stick with the defensive line, taking Landon Jackson, the edge rusher from Arkansas, with an 83 Pro Football Focus grade, sitting at 6'7", 280 pounds. He is the ideal size for a Detroit Lion. They love their edge rushers to be big and powerful and heavy and set the edge in the run game more than they need to get to the quarterback, and that is exactly what Landon Jackson does. With 7 sacks and 8 quarterback hits a season ago, being a first-team All-SEC player in 2023 and a second-team All-SEC defensive player in 2024, Landon Jackson is a high motor. He's a great athlete with an RAS score of 9.8 overall. He's good against the run. He's good as great size, and he is a very Lions type of player. He is the, big, high motor, sets the edge, gets to the quarterback, power over finesse. He is the prototype for the Detroit Lions. If they could design a prototypical defensive end, it would be Landon Jackson. 6'7", 280 pounds, malicious against the run, powerful pass rusher, lots of energy, lots of ambition, and a player that I think they'd really like to bring in. They met with him at the NFL Combine. They really like him out of Arkansas, and I think if he's there in the second round, we could see the Razorback become a Detroit Lion, officially giving them a true edge rusher 2 next to Aiden Hutchinson. And with him, Al-Qaeda Muhammad, Marcus Davenport, and a couple of other guys on the exterior, I think that could be a really good and deep rotation for the edge rushing group, as well as just adding some more talent to a group that is already quite good and quite deep. Moving on to the third round of the NFL draft, the Detroit Lions stay in the SEC, and they go to the Alabama Crimson Tide, where Malachi Moore will be the 102nd overall pick. Sitting at 6 foot, even to 182 pounds, Malachi Moore has been a great player for the Crimson Tide over the last few seasons. 70 tackles a year ago, a sack, 3 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 8 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. He is that slot versus safety versatility. He's a playmaker, of course, the Alabama background and really being the replacement to Brian Branch. He's a second-team All-American and a first-team All-SEC defender a season ago. There were times where Malachi Moore was talked about as a potential top 20 pick, talked about as a first-round talent and a bona fide superstar. And those days are gone, right? He struggled a little bit more at Alabama than a lot of people thought he would, but overall, I think he's still a very strong player. Of course, when you are a second team All-American, you are a first team All-SEC defensive player, you have the goods to make it in the NFL. I think Malachi Moore, having that Alabama background, joining forces with Brian Branch yet again, and being just the third safety, having some special teams roles, having a hyper-specified role in the defense, and doing just a few things very well can maximize his potential with Detroit. And playing behind guys like Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch would allow him to really focus on just the few things that he does really well, give the Detroit Lions a versatile slot defender, a versatile third safety, and essentially replace Ifeatu Melifonwu with somebody a little bit healthier and somebody that fits the system to an absolute T. Moving on to pick 130, the Detroit Lions for the first time go to the offensive side of the ball and address the wide receiver position with Torrey Horton. Wide receiver from Colorado State, standing at 6'2", 175 pounds. He's the ideal size for the Detroit Lions and what they like at wide receiver. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard, 8-touchdown seasons in 2022 and 2023. Had a bit of a slump in 2024, partially due to injuries, partially due to offensive changes. Just overall didn't really have the perfect season aligned for him, but was a first-team Mountain West Conference wide receiver and punt returner 2 years in a row from 2022 to 2023. He's a good athlete running in the 4.4s for a wide receiver, which is where you want him to be. Has strong hands, separation ability, yak ability, and really just the ability to make plays in an offense. He would come in and be the Detroit Lions' likely wide receiver 5 behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Tim Patrick, and Khalif Raymond, but could eventually develop into a really solid wide receiver 2, that Z wide receiver while Amon-Ra works in the slot, and give them a really good trio while getting younger and still getting a really good product at the wide receiver position. At pick 196, the Detroit Lions stay on the offense, but they go back into the trenches with Jake Majors, the center from the University of Austin, Texas. Standing at 6'3", 315 pounds, he had a good season for Texas. 602 pass blocking snaps, 0 sacks allowed, and just 2 quarterback hits. He's a strong pass protector, a solid run blocker, and potentially the career center of the future, right? Frank Ragnow's future is not certain for the Detroit Lions. Every year, it seems like he's potentially contemplating retirement, and that's something that the Detroit Lions just really don't want to have to deal with. They brought in Kingsley Eguakun a season ago, who I thought had a good preseason, but of course, being an undrafted rookie leaves the door wide open for somebody else to come take that spot. And for a pick on day 3 to potentially develop into that starting center of the future, I think it's well worth the pick for Jake Majors. Adds some immediate depth, but also gives the Lions the opportunity to kind of, have that future backup plan and have some quality depth if Frank Ragnow does suffer through an injury. Pick 228, second to last pick in the draft. The Detroit Lions go back to the trenches and back to the SEC as they pick Quandarius Robinson, K. Robinson, from the University of Alabama. 6'5", 220 pounds, a little smaller than a guy like Landon Jackson, but still sets the edge really well, is a great athlete. Had 4 sacks, 7 TFLs, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery a season ago. He sets the edge very well. He has a powerful first punch. He's a good athlete, good change of direction, range to spy the quarterback, and I think could be a really versatile weapon on a Detroit Lions defensive line that was in need of pass rushers a season ago. He had 4.5 sacks last year with the Crimson Tide. Never really turned into a great pass rusher at Alabama. Was always a much better athlete than a polished product, but that's what day 3 is for. Get a player that has good athletic upside, a player that has good traits, a player that has shown the ability to grow and get to the quarterback in his collegiate career. Worst case scenario, you have a great special teams player. Best case scenario, you can develop this guy into a really quality rotational pass rusher and end up leaving the draft with some great value on day 3. And then, for the final pick of the draft, the Detroit Lions select Luke Lockheed, the tight end from Iowa, right? A player that is going very much under the radar at this point in time. Through his career at Iowa in offenses that could not throw the ball more than 2 yards down the field, Luke Lockheed finished with 74 receptions, 893 yards, and 4 touchdowns through the air. Averaged 12 yards per reception. Has good size, proper build for a tight end, really strong hands, and a great contested catch type of player. Not the best blocker, but he's willing to do so when he is asked of him. And just overall, for a day 3, 7th round selection, transaction to get a potential tight end 2 is really worth it for the Detroit Lions. Is he the best tight end in the class? No. But if you're willing to bet on a day 3 pick, a 7th round pick, take a tight end from Iowa. Take the tight end from Iowa, and more times than not, you're going to end up having a really, really solid player. So with that being said, that is my draft class. It is a little bit smaller than what some people are putting out there. There was no trades in this mock draft. There will potentially be others in future drafts of the sort, but I think this is the right strategy for the Lions. Address the defensive line early with Walter Nolan and Landon Jackson. Address the secondary a little bit with guys like Malachi Moore. And then go to the offensive side. Add some depth at wide receiver. Add some depth in the interior offensive line. Add some depth at tight end. And really just hammer out some of these more shallow aspects of your roster. The Detroit Lions did a great job this offseason making sure they don't have a glaring hole at any position on the defense, so they can take best player available. They can continue to take great football players in the draft and continue to build in that manner. So with that being said, that is all for you guys today. A quick mock draft for today on Monday. The draft is on Thursday, so maybe we'll do one more before it officially arrives. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.